Instructor Vorruk had made many terrible decisions in his long career. He once tried to teach a Gorathian cadet how to use stealth technology. The Gorathian was 12 feet tall and weighed as much as a small moon. That had been a terrible decision. But this, he thought, staring at the human standing in front of him with a ridiculous grin on its face, this was going to be worse. Cadet Bram Osei, Vorruk said, tapping his data slate with one claw. You have, in the span of 4 rotations, broken 3 training drones, eaten the emergency rations meant for 40 soldiers, somehow convinced a medical AI that you were dying when you merely had a headache, and written your name on the ceiling of the High Commander's private quarters. He paused, in permanent pain. Bram Osei did not look ashamed. He looked, if anything, proud. To be fair, sir, Bram said, clasping his hands behind his back. The ceiling looked very boring. Vorruk closed his eyes, breathed, opened them again. I am sending you to Sector 9. The room went quiet, not because the room had been particularly loud, but because quiet has a way of becoming very loud when someone says something truly awful. The 2 junior instructors standing near the door exchanged a glance that said quite clearly, we are glad we are not that human. Sector 9 was not a place anyone sent cadets. Sector 9 was where the Velthri hunters trained. The Velthri were, by every measurable standard in the known galaxy, the most lethal apex predators to have ever achieved spaceflight. They hunted for sport, for discipline, and, some suspected, for fun. Their graduation ritual involved surviving in a zero-atmosphere corridor for 6 hours with nothing but a blade and a prayer to whatever gods were listening. No cadet had ever been dropped into a Velthri training session. It was not a policy that existed because it had never occurred to anyone. It was a policy that did not exist because it had never been necessary to write it down. Some things the galaxy assumed were simply understood. Vorruk was about to make it necessary to write it down. Sector 9, he repeated. You will spend 5 days with the Velthri. You will observe. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not touch anything. You will not eat their food, reorganize their weapons rack, or redecorate anything. He leaned forward. You will, Cadet Osei, either come back a disciplined soldier, or you will not come back at all. Bram tilted his head to one side. Which outcome are you hoping for, sir? Vorruk did not answer, which, honestly, was itself an answer. The transport pod dropped Bram at the entry hatch of Sector 9 at 0600 hours. Standard galactic time. The hatch was made of reinforced Turvian steel, 12 inches thick, and covered in warning symbols from 6 different species. Most of them meant danger. One of them, in the old Velthri script, meant something closer to you have already made a mistake by being here. Bram read none of them, because he had not yet learned old Velthri script. He knocked. There was a very long silence. Then the hatch opened, and standing on the other side was a Velthri hunter named Skarreth, who was 8 feet of gray muscle, for amber eyes, retractable bone spurs along both forearms, an expression that made predators in horror films look friendly and approachable by comparison. Skarreth looked at Bram. Bram looked at Skarreth. Hi, Bram said. I am Bram. I am your problem for the next 5 days. I have been told not to touch anything. I will probably touch some things. Skarreth said nothing for 6 full seconds. Then, slowly, in the clipped and precise way of someone who learned Standard Galactic as a 5th language, said, You are the cadet the instructor discarded. Discarded is a strong word, Bram said. I prefer strategically relocated. Another silence. Skarreth stepped aside, which, in Velthri body language, meant either you may enter or I'm giving you a head start. Bram decided to believe it was the former and walked in. The interior of the Velthri training sector smelled like metal, ozone, and something organic that Bram could not identify and decided not to think about too hard. The ceiling was high. The lights were low. 12 Velthri hunters stopped what they were doing and stared at the small, soft, oddly cheerful creature that had just walked through their door. Bram looked around, slowly, taking in the weapons mounted on the walls, the obstacle courses constructed from what appeared to be actual wreckage, and the 12 sets of amber eyes watching with a patient, calculating attention of beings who had never once in their lives lost a fight. He smiled. Nice place, he said. Very dramatic. I love what you've done with the lighting. Nobody laughed, but one of the hunters, deep in the back, flicked one ear, which, in Velthory, is the tiniest possible unit of amusement. It was a start. By the second day, the Velthory hunters had developed a problem. The problem was not that Bram Osei was annoying. Well, he was annoying, but annoying things could be removed. The problem was that Bram Osei was, against every law of logic and species survival, somehow fitting in. It had started with the obstacle course. Skarreth had not invited Bram to run it. Nobody had invited Bram to run it. Bram had simply watched two hunters complete the course, tilted his head the way he always did when something interested him, and said, "Can I try?" Skarreth had said nothing, which Bram had taken as yes, and which Skarreth had absolutely not meant as yes. The course was designed for Velthory physiology. 8 feet of height, for eyes for multi-angle tracking, bone spurs for grip on vertical surfaces. It involved a hanging traverse over a pit of electromagnetic disruptors, a zero-visibility sprint through a smoke corridor, and a final wall climb with handhold space for Velthory arm length, which was nearly double that of human. Bram fell off the traverse twice. He got completely lost in the smoke corridor, came out the wrong end, looked around, said, and went back in. The wall climb. He could not do the way it was intended, so he did it differently, finding angles and grip points that no Velthory had ever used because no Velthory had ever been that short or that stubborn. He finished in twice the time of any hunter. He was breathing hard. He had a bruise forming above his left eye. He raised both arms in the air like he had won something tremendous. "Good," he said, looking at Skarreth. Skarreth stared at him for a long moment. "You completed it wrong." "I completed it differently," Bram said. "There's a gap between those two things." In the back of the training floor, 3 hunters exchanged a look. One of them, a hunter named Drevka Souls, whose reputation was built on the fact that she had never, not once, expressed approval of anything, made a sound low in her throat that was not quite disapproval. That evening, something unexpected happened. The hunters ate together at the end of training, a ritual meal that was as much ceremony as it was sustenance. Nobody had told Bram about it. He had simply followed the group when they moved, sat himself at the end of the long table, and started eating what was placed in front of him without asking what it was. Drevka watched him from across the table. "You are not afraid," she said. It was not a compliment. It was a question. Bram chewed, swallowed, considered. "I am afraid of plenty of things," he said. "Paperwork. My commanding officer, when he makes that specific face. Closed spaces with no exits." He gestured around the table. "This is not one of those things." "We are predators," Drevka said. "You are prey." "With respect," Bram said pleasantly. "I am a cadet who once rewired a standard-issue training drone to deliver coffee on a timed schedule, who survived 3 years at the Interstellar Academy where the cafeteria food alone has hospitalized 4 species, and who has been told, very sincerely by multiple authority figures, that I am an unsolvable problem." He picked up his utensil again. "Prey does not give people this much trouble." The table was quiet. Then, from somewhere near the middle, a hunter named Ogreth, who was the largest of the group and who had not spoken a single word to Bram in 2 full days, made a sound. A short, sharp sound, somewhere between a cough and a bark. It took Bram a moment to realize it was laughter. Skarreth noticed it too. He said nothing, but his 4 amber eyes tracked Ogreth, then tracked Bram, and something behind him shifted, almost invisibly, like a current changing direction beneath still water. On the 3rd day, Skarreth found Bram sitting cross-legged in front of the weapons wall, not touching anything as instructed, but studying each piece with that focused, head-tilted attention he seemed to apply to everything. "You want to ask something," Skarreth said. "I always want to ask something," Bram replied. "This one specifically." He pointed to a long, curved blade mounted above the others. Its edge had a pattern worked into the metal, repeating symbols along the flat of the blade. "That is not a combat weapon. The balance is ceremonial, but it is mounted with the others. That means it matters in a different way." Skarreth was still for a moment. "It belonged to the first hunter in my line," he said at last. "She carried it on the first deep hunt. She did not come back. The blade did." Bram looked at it for another long moment. "That is not a sad story," he said quietly. "That is a proud one." You keep it here so every hunter who trains sees it, so they know what the blade cost and what it meant. Skarreth looked at the human beside him, this small, soft, absurdly persistent creature who had knocked on a door no sane being would knock on, run a course he was never built to run, eaten food he could not identify, and sat for 20 minutes studying a blade he was not allowed to touch, just to understand its story. "You are strange," Skarreth said. "I have been told," Bram said. On the 5th day, when the transport pod arrived to collect Cadet Bram Osei and return him to Instructor Vorruk, something happened that had no precedent in Velthury recorded history. All 12 hunters stood at the entry hatch to see him off, not because they were ordered to, not because protocol demanded it. Drevka stepped forward and pressed something into Bram's hand, a small token, carved from training floor scrap metal, marked with a single Velthury symbol. "What does it mean?" Bram asked. "It means," Drevka said, "that you ran the course." Bram closed his fingers around it. He did not say anything sentimental. He nodded once, the way soldiers do when words would be too small for the moment, and stepped into pod. When Instructor Vorruk saw Bram walk back through the academy doors, alive, uninjured, and smiling, he stared for a very long time. "How?" Vorruk said. "Are you still breathing?" Bram sat down in the chair across from him, relaxed as a being who had just returned from a pleasant vacation, and said, "Turns out, sir, if you treat apex predators like people, they tend to act like it." Vorruk looked at the small metal token in Bram's hand. He recognized the Velthury mark on it. He had been in the galactic military for 40 years. He had never seen that token given to anyone outside the Velthury. Not once. He picked up his data slate, found Bram's disciplinary file. It was very long. He deleted it. "Get out of my office, Cadet," he said. Bram stood, tucked the token into his chest pocket, and walked to the door. He stopped at the frame, turned back once, and said with complete sincerity, "For what it is worth, sir, your ceiling also looks boring." Then he was gone. Somewhere across the station, in Sector 9, Ogreth Vane was still laughing.